All right.
We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome 80-20 Baseball coaching community. Awesome to be here with you this week, our weekly get together where we become better coaches, more confident coaches, more prepared coaches, and more successful coaches / parents / players. In this week's episode, we're going to break down, clearly understand 3 main reasons players quit playing youth sports, and in our case, youth baseball. Also, the 80-20 rule popped up randomly while I was in the car talking to my 6-year-old. And I think this is something that many of you will find interesting, something that's a part of our lives. And I thought it was an interesting example. We're not going to spend much time on that, but I thought it was interesting. And I'll share that with you in just a little bit. If you haven't already, go back and listen. Last week's episode, we talked about the makings of a 400 hitter. Now, I'm not big on batting average. It does have some merit, but it has some huge flaws. If you've been listening for any length of time, you know the 2 major flaws of batting average are 1, every hit is equal. So a double to the gap is the same as a blooper that just happens to fall in, or a triple is the same as a 4-hopper up the middle, a base hit. But a triple gets, of course, the runner to third, way closer to scoring a run. So it doesn't factor in things like hustle as much, trying to get that double, trying to get that triple, or hitting the ball really hard. A hit is a hit. They're all equal. A ball off the wall or a weak base hit. Of course, hits are good, but as you can see, that's a huge flaw in that stat. And then there's another massive flaw in that stat. It doesn't count walks. How do you not count walks? Walks are awesome. Walks are great. Walks don't just get you a base, but it also means our hitters aren't going up there and just swinging at anything. So the more walks a team has typically means they have a better approach. The batting average statistic doesn't give credit for walks, doesn't give credit for stretching a single into a double, doesn't give any extra credit for that. It doesn't give any credit for hitting a triple into the gap. It doesn't give any extra credit, I should say, any more than just a base hit. And it doesn't count walks, which to me, if we're trying to create a team that's unselfish and we're trying to create team players, walks are one of the best examples of how players can put the team ahead of themselves. And I think if we really are honest, and those of us that have really been in baseball deep for a long time, I think there's a decent amount of hitters, especially early on, that know their batting average can't go up. It can't go down, but it can't go up if they don't get a hit. If they walk. On base percentage is good, but it has some flaws too. On base plus slugging is better. And of course, how many runs do they create? But nevertheless, it's always cool, that number 400. It's just a cool number, especially for a lot of you that are old school baseball or older baseball fans. It's definitely a fun number as a fan to watch. It's not something I would necessarily promote if I'm a coach. I wouldn't demote that, or I wouldn't discourage a hitter, of course, from hitting 400, in this case in the major leagues. I know batting average at youth baseball can be a little bit higher on the curve on average, but it does make it fun for fans to watch. I shared 2 tips last week about how to give better talks to our players, how to get more out of those talks. So go back, listen to that episode if you haven't. The other day, I was driving back from taking my kid to jiu-jitsu practice, and a fire truck was pulling out of the fire station with its lights on. And we stopped. There's a light. A lot of those fire stations have their own designated light that turns on, or at least turns red, for the passing cars so they can make their way out and traffic is already stopped. So I'm the first one at the red light. We watch the fire truck pull out, and my kid says to me, "Hey, Daddy, why is the fire truck going somewhere? I don't see any smoke anywhere." And it got me thinking, the 80-20 rule is live and well with fire department calls. So I found some data. This is from FEMA, USFireAdministration.gov in 2020. And this data is pretty consistent all the way back. 2020, fire departments responded to 27 million incidents. This is in the United States. So fire departments responded to 27 million incidents. Only 4% were fire related. Only 4% of fire department runs were fire related. 64% were due to one thing: emergency medical services, non-fire related, heart attacks, diabetic, low blood sugar, seizures, etc. So 64% were one thing, and fire related was just 4%. So 96% of fire department response calls or responses, when they leave the fire station, 96% of the time it's not for a fire. Now I'm going to tie this in with baseball. I thought that was an interesting stat. I was relatively surprised. If you're training a fire department, firemen, firewomen to be really good. If you're coaching them up and they're going through the academy and you're one of the coaches, one of the trainers, one of the teachers, it's really important to know these numbers, this data, because if you spend 90%, 80%, 50% of their time training in the fire academy to prepare for fires and putting out fires and handling fires, that doesn't add up. 96% of the time, they're not even going out and dealing with fires. Now, I'm not saying only 4% of the training should be fire related, because fire calls, going out to dealing with a fire, I'm guessing is a lot more dangerous than most the other things they do or they go on calls for. So it's important that we think about what happens for example, in a game, how often it happens and how vital it is. So not just how often things happen in life, but also how important they are. So there's life, there's fire, there's baseball. So when you go to coach up your team, your kid, what happens the most in a game? What are the things that happen the most? Hitting, pitching, or of course the top two happen every pitch. You could throw in catching, the catching position on defense. If they're not a pitcher, if you're dealing with just one player, a first baseman is going to make a lot more catches. They're going to receive the ball a lot more than they are going to field ground balls. When I do practice, my first basemen get way fewer ground balls than they do throws to first from the other positions. So knowing how often something happens and then training accordingly. Now, I'd love to hear if there's some firemen, firewomen listening to this, firefighters, a lot of respect for our emergency services, our emergency personnel, police, fire, a lot of respect. I think most people would genuinely have the utmost respect for our emergency services if they could just really see or picture how it would be or how society would be like without those. So I'd love to hear if there's any firemen or firewomen listening to this. Let me know how much of that training is fire related. And you go, well, Coach Bo, are we talking about fires or baseball? This is an example I thought all of us could relate to. It caught me off guard the other day coming home from jiu-jitsu, the question or the statement, I should say. And it made me think it's important, right? We're going to train our fire departments to be really good at what they do. Well, what is it they do? 96% of the time, it's not fires. I would, of course, if I was training up and coming firefighters, I would definitely factor in the risk of each thing that they go out on a call for. Like if they're wrong or if they mess up, what's the risk? And of course, losing their life. Fires got to be at the top of that list. Dealing with fires, definitely one of their, if not their most risky calls. So that factors in. So you wouldn't necessarily train it 4% of the time. Same thing with baseball. What are the things that matter the most when it comes game time? What are the things that happen the most? And how much do they affect the game? Keep that in mind as you're planning practices, as you're training players, your team, your kid. And if anything, you just got an interesting stat that I think is pretty interesting. So next time you see a fire truck taking off, 96% chance they're doing something, most likely an emergency medical service or something different than a fire. Another 80-20 thing that popped up, I have a note app. I've used Apple Notes. It goes with my phone and my computer. And the Apple Note application is not very glamorous. It's not glitzy. There are definitely other note apps that have a lot more things, even a better look. But Apple's really good at the 80-20. They're really good at the 80-20. In fact, when Steve Jobs took back over in the late 90s, I think they had like 40 products and he cut it down to very few. He said, what are the 20% of our products that are 80 or 90% of our sales? Let's cut the rest out, focus on those that are bringing the biggest results. So I was looking at notes and I have all these podcast episodes. I script them out on notes and I have a template and that template's evolved and I script it out on my Apple Notes. Part of that is because it easily syncs between things and I can have it on my phone if I need to grab it real quick and just see it when I'm out and about. But there are definitely other note apps that are much more comprehensive and have a more beautiful design. And I've tested out 4 or 5 over the last month to see if there was something that would fit better. And at the end of the day, I came back to the Apple Notes. It covers the 90% of things and they're simple, straightforward. And that's really how our practices should be. That's how our training should be. You don't need 40 different drills. You don't need 20 different drills. You need some key drills that are your best drills for the things that happen in a game and get really good at those drills, running those drills, optimizing those drills. Moving forward, got a new podcast cover art coming out. If you see the podcast cover art change, I just got it updated. I talked to my lady, Sherry, who helps me with those design things. And she just finished up sharing out the scrimmage design guide, which will be put into the coaching course. And don't worry, I'll announce it here first when that's launching. So Sherry updated my podcast cover art, the podcast cover art for this podcast. So if you see it look different, I wanted to also be very clear about what we're trying to do here. I wanted everybody to know that's clicking on it that This is what we're doing. We're efficiently mastering the key parts of coaching youth baseball. And I also wanted to get my ugly mug a little smaller. And originally, Sherry, my design lady, put a stadium on there, and I thought, it's not really fitting. This is youth baseball. I'm not playing in a stadium with 3 decks, with 3 levels. We're out there on youth fields. So I got the background image a little more focused on the field. Anyways, so if you see that difference, we're continuing to get better, just like the cover art. We're always trying to get this podcast better. It's our weekly get together, checking in, and it will continue to get better and better. And even though this might be the off season for some of you, going into the off season for some of you, this is really the time that you want to get into learning. You don't want to learn just during the season. It's too late to learn a ton and implement too much new stuff during the season. The off season is the best time to start formulating a plan for next season. Next year. LSU baseball. LSU won the College Baseball World Series. Here's something I noticed about LSU baseball that we can learn from. They had a wide variety of players. Right? So when you're putting a team together, coaches, your players don't all have to look alike. They shouldn't all fit into one mold. LSU was like a hodgepodge. Talk about a variety, a mix. They all look different. They all had different skill sets for the most part in terms of what their ultimate strengths were. But they're 20% of the fundamentals, the 20% of what we need to focus on as coaches and as players was the same. They all competed. They had a quality hitting approach. They swung at their pitch. They didn't chase a bunch of pitches. They swung at their pitches, and they were trying to hit hard line drives into the outfield. On the mound, they located their fastball. They threw a second pitch for strikes, and they all had an occasional third pitch or a different variation of that second pitch to keep hitters a little hesitant. On the bases, they were looking to get to the next base. They were not content where they were, well, at least until they were at home plate. So LSU won the College Baseball World Series. Something to take away from that, wide variety of players. They all looked very different. Big, small, tall, thin, heavyset, different hair, very different. But the things that matter, they competed, quality hitting approach, line drives to the outfield, on the mound, locate that fastball, and throw a second pitch for strikes with an occasional third pitch to keep hitters hesitant. So that was pretty cool to see. LSU's big on baseball. It's a big deal. Check that last part. Here's a funny story about LSU baseball. Years ago, I was out there. I played for Long Beach State. We played LSU a couple different years while I was there, and we're out there at LSU, and I had arm surgery, so I wasn't traveling as a player, but I traveled out to support the team, to support my teammates. And before the game, well, we couldn't be in the dugout. We couldn't be involved. We actually had to buy our own Southwest ticket to get out there. I went out there with one of my teammates at the time, Matt. So we got over there well before the first game. And while they were taking batting practice and things, of course, we couldn't be out on the field. It was against the rules. They could only travel a certain amount of players. So we're out in the outfield, or I should say out behind the outfield wall, talking to some fans, LSU fans, had a barbecue going. And I noticed one of them was drinking these smaller cans of beer. And I said, hey, what's the deal with those? What's the deal with those beers you all are drinking? He goes, they're 10 ounces. He said, we don't like those last couple ounces because those last couple ounces, by then, the beer's not cold. We like 10 ounces. Then we get 10 ounces that's cold. We don't deal with those last 2 ounces where it gets a little warm. I thought, man, that makes sense, right? My comeback was, well, I guess out in California, we just drink a little faster. He got a chuckle out of it, but that was interesting. I don't know if they still sell those 10 ounces or not, but hey, thinking outside the box, thinking a little different. Always good to see. Coaching tweet of the month. Become the person who would attract the results you seek. End quote. Jim Cathcart. This is a good quote for our players. You could say this to your players throughout the season, at the beginning of the season. Quote, become the player. You can tell your players your practice habits, who you are in practice, and your pregame habits, and how much sleep you're getting on game nights, and making sure you're eating somewhat healthy, staying hydrated before you come to the game. Become the player, the person who will attract the results in the game that you seek. So become the practice player, become the pregame player who will attract the results you seek come game time. Thought that was a good quote by Jim Cathcart. Become the player, become the practice player, the pregame player, the off-field player who's going to attract the results come game time that they're seeking. So kids quitting sports, we can't coach them up. We can't help them if they quit. We need to keep them out there. I was teaching a summer school class about 13, 14 years ago. And mind you, these are all inner city kids, high school, 16, 17. And the cap for the class was 75. Now it was a PE class, so the cap was higher. but the summer school cap was 75. That was the school or the counselor or the district cap. I had 75 students to start the summer, and there was a waiting list. So I told the counselors, I said, hey, send them my way. I had to sign off for all of them. So I just said, hey, I'll save you a bunch of steps. And I just emailed them, quick little email, so they had something in writing. I said, send as many students to my class. I'll take as many as I can fit on the field, on the courts, in the gym, etc. I ended the summer with 109 students in my class. So I was running a summer school PE class for 5 hours a day with 109 students, kids, teenagers, inner city teenagers. Many different gangs were represented. There was a lot going on. These are some of the strategies that really, I think, elevated my coaching game. Taking the understanding of the skills of baseball, understanding the strategies and schematics of the games, and then tying it together with how to manage efficiently and effectively huge groups of kids. And the counselor said to me at the end of the summer, hey, why'd you do that? You don't need to take that many kids. I said, if they're not in my class, I can't help them. If they're not in my class, I can't mentor them. If they're not in my class, I can't make a difference with them. I need them there first and foremost. So kids that quit sports, we can't help. We need to keep them involved. That's why it's so important that kids have a good time, that it's fun, enjoyable, not necessarily easy, not necessarily lacking challenges, but we need to do our best to keep them involved. And according to FamilyEducation.com and Michael Fall, Executive Director of the National Youth Sports Coaches Association, quote, the number one reason why kids quit youth sports is that it stops being fun. Stops being fun. That's why they quit. Number one reason, 70% of kids quit playing league sports by age 13 and never play them again, according to the National Alliance for Sports. You can see this article over at FamilyEducation.com. Middle school is where kids start dropping out in big numbers. And the article says playing sports loses its enjoyment for them and the fun takes a backseat to winning. And AlleySports.com, an article by Matt Bradley titled 5 Huge Problems with Youth Sports. So this article too says research shows that 50% of kids quit youth sports by age 11. Wow. And 70% quit by age 13. I've told you before, I remember coaching a 14U team. So I'm coaching a 14U team and there's a kid skateboarding around during practice. So the first 3 or 4 practices, this kid's skateboarding around and he knows all the other kids on the team. They all know each other really well. I saw him pick up a ball that had been errantly thrown off over by the path off to the side of the field where he was skateboarding. So he was skateboarding, but his mom was involved with the league and helping the league. They had another son, so they were helping with the league, and that's why they were there. And he was over there skateboarding, picks up the ball. Mind you, this kid's already more athletic looking just on the surface and bigger than the other kids. Not a lot bigger, but a little bit taller and athletic looking, has good fluid movements, picks up the ball and throws an absolute strike. And instantaneously, I knew this kid had a better natural arm than anybody that we had out on the field. So I said to his mom, I said, hey, how come he doesn't play? He said, oh, he did for a lot of years. He quit last year, stopped being fun. Now he skateboards. This is a kid, if he stuck with it, would have had a high probability of getting an opportunity to play college baseball or maybe more. Nothing against skateboarding. Skateboarding is great, but it should be more of an option rather than a forced choice where we force kids to want to quit because we stop making it fun. Early specialization pressure. That's another big reason. Somebody asked me, I was a multi-sport athlete all the way through high school, basketball, football, baseball. I stopped playing basketball my freshman year, played football through my senior year, and baseball all the way through. And I got asked this question a lot about playing multiple sports. Does it help your main sport if you play these other sports? Do they complement each other? Do the skill sets? And is your footwork better if you do this sport and it's going to help you? And I said, yes, it does. It does kind of add a little more variety and symmetry to the athleticism, a little more balance, well-roundedness when it comes to athleticism. Also, different mental skill sets come into play with different sports. But the biggest thing for me was getting a 6-month break from the other sport. So I would go 6 months hardcore with one sport, then rotate 6 months hardcore with the other sport, football and baseball back and forth, or my freshman year, basketball and baseball. And that mental benefit of getting away was awesome. I signed my kid up for jiu-jitsu and there's 3 practices a week or 3 sessions a week. And we were going to 3 sessions a week early on. And even me, I made a mistake. I think we went too long with that. And I should have just started with 2 sessions and stuck with 2 sessions from the get-go. Now she goes 2 sessions a week, but it hit me. Even me taking my own advice here was, we did the first month, so about 4 weeks, 3 days a week. And I could see it's like, there was a reaction when I said, we're going to go to jiu-jitsu. Now, these classes are like 45 minutes, not even an hour. So they're not even 2-hour practices, but still, her reaction when I said, hey, we got jiu-jitsu today. She said something like, again? Or, okay. She kind of sighed and I said, just was the reaction that said, It wasn't even like she didn't like it. It was just like, again? Can I get a little break? Now, there's nothing wrong with getting up every day and going to work, doing the same thing, grinding it out, being a grinder. But I think there's that balance when it comes to youth sports. So I immediately talked to my wife. I said, hey, we got to back off. It's got to be 2 days a week. And we can also be flexible on those because it's not a team sport. So you're not missing out on a team thing, which makes it a little easier. And I said, we need to be more flexible on what days. If her cousin was visiting last week, comes into town and is there on a Thursday, but leaves Saturday morning, well, then we won't go Thursday to practice. We'll go to the jiu-jitsu practice Saturday after the cousin takes off to get back home. So I made that mistake. And here I am on this podcast giving suggestions and tips and strategies for youth coaches. So it happens to all of us. So specialization, just burning out. Not giving them a break. All right. Every kid's going to be a little different, but on average, the majority of kids need to get away from it and do something different. And another main reason that kids stop playing youth baseball or just baseball in general is it gets expensive. But that doesn't have to be so. It doesn't have to be expensive. From this article, it says a recent study. I'd love to see the study. It says that the average family pays around $2,300 a year for their children to participate in sports. Doesn't have to be. The equipment that players need, that coaches need, doesn't need to cost a lot. I think you should spread the cost out amongst the team. If you're a coach, everybody pitches in a little bit. So that equipment, the baseballs, the training equipment can go a lot further. Instead of getting private lessons, set up a group lesson. So instead of paying $50 an hour, for example, maybe you pay $15 an hour and go with 4 other kids, or I should say 3 other kids, 4 kids total. Talk to the coach, say, hey, I'm going to bring out 4 players. Instead of an hour, go 90 minutes. Tell them everybody puts in $20. The coach gets $80 for 90 minutes. They'll take that, most all of them. Now you just got a 90-minute training session for $20. Of course, the trade-off is a little less individual focus, but being out there with other kids can be very beneficial and advantageous as compared to just being out there by themselves with just an adult coach. It also allows for more competitions, more group activities, more game-like things to have groups. So cuts the cost. It's a win-win-win. By not playing year-round, you save money. By doing things that are athletic, maybe a family thing or a group of friends set it up. Like frisbee golf. There's a lot of free frisbee golf places you can go. It's an activity. It gets out there. You can make it competitive. You don't need all the fancy discs. And that could be something that you do as a family or a group of kids. Maybe say, hey, we're going to get together once a week and do this. Frisbee golf or something of that sort. There's spike ball. Spike ball is a popular game. It's literally like a $20 setup, $25 setup, a little net trampoline thing and a ball. Talk about athleticism. Go out there, get a group, host a little tournament at your house. Basketball, always a cheap sport to play. All you need is a ball and a court. Organize something there. So playing sports, having fun, doesn't always need to be super organized and super expensive. So we got to think out of the box a little bit there where kids can work on competing with themselves, working as a team, having fun, doing something athletic, doing high quality athletic movements, but don't have to spend a bunch of money on it. So kids quit because it's not fun, usually because the coaches are negative, not enough praise, not enough structure. It's typically not because they're not winning enough or they're not having enough success because we're coaching them up on the wrong thing in terms of individual success, like they're striking out a bunch or they're walking a bunch of hitters as pitchers or they can't feel the ground ball. Well, stick with the 80-20 and you'll get those main skills better a lot faster. And thus they'll have more confidence on the things that happen more often in a game. Kids burn out because they don't get a break. Got to give them a break. Get them doing something else and the cost of it. So just be careful feeling like you need to sign them up for the most expensive things. Sometimes the least expensive or less expensive things can be just as much fun. What it does is it takes a little more forethought, a little more time. It might take an extra 10, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes of brainstorming with you and your spouse or some other parents of the kids to come up with a plan and set it up. Might take a little more effort, but it'll save you money and possibly have even more fun. Next week's episode, we're going to talk about, speaking of the 80-20 principle, we're going to talk about the 80-20 principle of practice planning. I'm going to share with you specific tips to get the most out of your practice so your players can get better, faster on the right things. 80-20 practice planning next week. If you haven't already, go get the drill design guide. It's free, 21-page PDF over there at 8020baseball.com, 8020baseball.com. I updated that drill design guide to better quality PDF. The content's the same, but the quality's better. You can follow on Twitter, 8020_baseball. Support the podcast. Quickly leave a review. I don't run ads on here. Well over 4,000 minutes of strategies, tips, content. No advertisements at all, but I do ask, it would be awesome if you could just quickly just leave a review, an honest review, or at a minimum a rating on your podcast app, or send it to somebody else. Share it with somebody else that you know. Just send the link over. Say, hey, listen to this. Check this out. That would mean a lot. And that would be a great way for you to kind of give back on that end and keep this rolling and really help the baseball community be better. The youth baseball community continue to get better. That's our main goal. Better players, better youth baseball community. And it starts, in my opinion, with better coaches, more confident coaches, more prepared coaches. Email me your success stories. Tell me how your season went, your spring season. It's just finishing up. I would love to hear from you. I love getting those emails. And until next week, take care of yourself, your health, your families, your close friends, at least those friends that are there for you when you need them. Not the ones that say they're our friends, but the ones that show us they're our friends. So we're taking care of our health so we can be better for our family. We're there for our close friends, and we can be better coaches out there on the baseball field. Take this information out there to the field and put it in. Doesn't just stop here. Put it in. Use it. Go use it. Pick something or a few things, one or two things, and go use it. Go use it as soon as you can, and you can fine tune it from there. All right, until next week, adios.
This has been the 80/20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.